We're only 1,000 subscribers away from unlocking a secret reward. Be the reason it happens faster. I put on my uniform that morning like I always did, sharp, disciplined, ready for anything. 14 years in the army teaches you to notice details. It teaches you to read a room. And that morning, something in my own house felt wrong. My name is Major Sarah Hayes. I'd just come back from deployment 2 weeks earlier. 2 weeks of trying to fit back into a life that had kept moving without me. My husband, Daniel, said all the right things. I missed you. The house wasn't the same without you. I love you. But something was off. A feeling soldiers know well, the feeling right before an ambush. So that day, I decided to test it. I grabbed my keys, kissed my daughter Emma on the forehead, and told Daniel I was heading to base for a few hours. I slammed the front door hard enough for the whole house to hear it. Then I didn't leave. I walked around to the side yard, pulled out my phone, and opened the app connected to Emma's baby monitor, the one I'd installed just in case, back when I still trusted this house to be safe without me watching. I waited. My heart pounded harder than it ever had in combat. 30 seconds later, I heard Daniel's voice through the speaker. And what he said next made my blood turn to ice. Let me back up. Daniel and I had been married for 6 years. We met when I was a young lieutenant, and he was a civilian contractor working logistics. He used to tell people he fell in love with a woman who could outrun him and out-argue him. It was sweet back then. We had Emma 3 years ago. She is my entire world. When the Army sent me overseas for a 10-month deployment, it broke my heart to leave her. But Daniel promised me, looking me straight in the eyes, that he would take perfect care of our daughter, that he would hold the family together while I served. I believed him. I had to believe him. You cannot survive a deployment carrying doubt about your own home. Every phone call, every video chat, he seemed proud, loving, present. He'd show me Emma's drawings, her new words, her tiny victories. I cried more from happiness than homesickness. But 2 weeks ago, when I finally came home, something had shifted. Small things. Emma flinched at loud noises. She barely wanted to talk about her days with her father when I asked. Daniel's phone stayed face down on tables. He'd disappear into the garage for work calls that lasted far too long for actual work. I told myself I was being paranoid. Combat does that to you, makes you suspicious of shadows that aren't there. But a mother's instinct is not paranoia. And a soldier's instinct is not imagination. Something in my house was hiding from me. The days that followed were quiet, but not peaceful. I started paying closer attention, not obsessively, just carefully, the way you'd survey unfamiliar terrain. I noticed Daniel would grow tense whenever I mentioned stopping by the house unannounced. I noticed he always wanted to know my schedule down to the hour. One night, Emma woke up crying from a nightmare. When I went to comfort her, she whispered something strange. Is the lady gone, Mommy? I froze. What lady, sweetheart? She just shook her head and buried herself in her blanket, refusing to say more. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I found a receipt in Daniel's jacket pocket, a hotel 30 minutes from our house, dated during a week I was still overseas. My hands trembled as I held it, but my training kicked in. Soldiers don't panic. Soldiers gather intelligence before they act. So, I made a plan. I would create a scenario, announce I was leaving for the day but actually stay close enough to watch. The baby monitor app, still linked to my phone from years ago, would let me listen without being seen. If nothing was wrong, I'd feel foolish, and I'd apologize to myself for doubting him. But if something was wrong, I needed proof. Not suspicion. Proof. That's the mission I set for that morning. That's why I slammed the door and pretended to leave. I stood in the side yard, phone pressed to my ear, listening through the monitor. At first, silence. Then footsteps. Then Daniel's voice, but not talking to Emma. She's finally gone, he said, laughing softly. Took her long enough. A second voice answered. A woman's voice. Familiar. Warm. Comfortable in my house, in a way that made my stomach twist. You sure she bought it? The woman asked. She always does, Daniel replied. Sarah trusts me completely. It's almost too easy. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Then I heard something that broke me more than the affair itself. Daniel spoke to Emma. "Sweetheart, remember, this is our secret, okay? Don't tell Mommy about Miss Rachel visiting. It's our special game." My daughter, my 3-year-old daughter, had been taught to lie to me, to keep secrets from her own mother in her own home about a woman who had clearly been coming around during my entire deployment. The betrayal wasn't just against me. It was against my child's innocence. Every image of Daniel's loving phone calls, his promises, his tears when I left for war, they all shattered in that single moment. He hadn't just cheated. He had built a hidden life inside our home and trained our daughter to protect his secret. I didn't cry. Soldiers don't cry in the field. I documented everything. I recorded the audio. I noted the time, the date, every word. Because now this wasn't about heartbreak. This was about justice. I walked back into the house that evening like nothing had happened. I smiled at Daniel. I let him believe his secret was still safe. But inside, I was building a strategy sharper than anything I'd used in the field. First, I contacted a military lawyer friend who specialized in family law. I explained everything, the recording, the pattern of deception, the impact on Emma. She confirmed the evidence was strong and, more importantly, legally usable. Second, I quietly reached out to Miss Rachel. It turned out she was a former coworker of Daniel's, married herself, with 2 kids of her own who had no idea what their mother had been doing. I didn't confront her with anger. I simply sent her the recording, along with a short message. "I think your family deserves to know the truth, too." Third, I began collecting financial statements. I found hotel charges, gift purchases, restaurant receipts, all funded from our joint account, all timed perfectly with days I was overseas defending country while my own home was being betrayed. Fourth, and most importantly, I made sure Emma was safe. I arranged for my mother to stay with us, giving Emma stability and a trusted adult while everything unfolded. I didn't want revenge built on rage. I wanted a truth so undeniable that Daniel could never talk his way out of it, never manipulate the situation, never make me the villain in my own story. 2 weeks of careful, quiet preparation. 2 weeks of pretending everything was normal while gathering the exact tools needed to expose him completely. By the time I was ready, Daniel had no idea the woman he called easy to fool was assembling a case strong enough to change his entire life. 6. The climax, confrontation. I chose a Sunday evening when Emma was asleep and my mother sat quietly in the next room, ready if needed. I sat across from Daniel at our kitchen table, the same table where he'd once promised to be faithful while I served overseas. "I know about Rachel," I said calmly. His face went pale. He started to stammer excuses. "It's not what you think. It just happened." The same tired lines every betrayer uses. I placed my phone on the table and played the recording. His words, his laughter, his instructions to our daughter to lie to me. The color drained completely from his face as he listened to himself, condemned by his own voice. "You taught Emma to keep secrets from me," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You didn't just betray me, Daniel. You used our daughter to do it." He tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. "I already spoke to a lawyer," I continued. "I have the recordings, the financial records, everything. And Rachel's husband already knows the truth, too." His composure completely broke. You told him?" "I told the truth," I said. "Something you clearly forgot how to do. I told him he would move out that night. I told him custody of Emma would be reviewed with full transparency about what he'd done, including teaching a child to deceive her own mother. I told him the life he thought he could hide behind my back was over." For the first time since I'd known him, Daniel had no clever response, no charm, no excuse strong enough. Just silence and the weight of consequences finally catching up to him. The following months were not easy, but they were honest, and honesty, I learned, is its own kind of peace. Daniel moved out. The divorce proceedings moved forward with all the evidence firmly in my favor. The court took the emotional manipulation of Emma especially seriously, granting me primary custody while ensuring Daniel's involvement would always be supervised until trust, if ever, could be rebuilt. Rachel's marriage also ended, her own family reeling from a betrayal she never expected to be exposed. I felt no satisfaction in her pain, only in the fact that the truth, however painful, was now out in the open where it belonged. As for me, I focused on rebuilding, not revenge, but restoration. I spent my next assignment closer to home. I read Emma bedtime stories every night. Slowly, she stopped flinching at raised voices. Slowly, she stopped keeping secrets. One night, months later, she looked up at me and said, "Mommy, I don't like secrets anymore." I hugged her tightly and whispered, "Me neither, baby. Not anymore." I spent years defending my country, trained to notice danger before it strikes. But nothing prepared me for the ambush that came from inside my own home. Still, I learned something powerful that day. I slammed the door and pretended to leave. Truth doesn't hide forever. Betrayal always leaves a trace, and patience, not anger, is often the sharpest weapon of all.
I didn't destroy my family that day.
Daniel did, long before I ever pressed record. All I did was make sure the truth could no longer stay silent. If you're ever standing where I once stood, sensing something is wrong, doubting your own judgment because the person you love insists everything is fine, trust yourself. Instincts are rarely wrong. Only proof takes time. And sometimes, the quietest moment, a closed door, a small monitor, a few seconds of silence, is enough to change everything.